Hello everyone, how you doing? It's interesting to consider that being in the UK, it would have had a slightly different life cycle of the last 24 hours than you guys. So if I had been in Perth, I would have seen the tweet from Ryan Daniels that this trade was happening right before I went to bed, I presume. But for me, that was the start of the day. And then at the end of the day, the trade here in the UK got confirmed. Whereas for you guys, you would have woken up to the deal being done and you are still at the end of that day. So the point being is we both had a night to sleep on it, but I've had a night to sleep on it after the actual confirmation. And I must admit, I stayed up way too late last night reading Twitter. So I never go on Twitter because it is just a potentially toxic place. And it was absolutely like that, but I couldn't help but find some of it soothing. And at times people were probably going a little bit harder than I would have. But nonetheless, it was kind of funny. I was on Big Footy, just dropping jokes. I realize that's how I deal with a lot of Eagles stuff. I try and make a joke out of it. And I do like to preserve a sense of humor, even when things are bad. So I was just dropping bangers left, right, and center on Big Footy. Got a few likes. It was good fun. And it was all just therapy for, the sheer and utter disappointment I had with this deal. So I summed up a lot of that in yesterday's immediate reaction video, where I was responding to the trade that was proposed by, or suggested by, first Ryan Daniels, and then Toomey got in on it, and then Tom Morris after that, and Riley Beveridge, and it just became this thing. It's interesting to note that the deal's actually worse than I thought it was. So yesterday, I vehemently roasted the club for this decision to accept this deal, on the basis that, I thought we were getting 24 back from Richmond, which in hindsight, 14 for Liam Baker is probably what they would deem as fair. But I thought, he's uncontracted. Maybe we swindled a 24 out of this. So we hold one less top 30 pick than I originally thought. But further to that, I'm going to put the trade on the screen here. Further to that, not only were we universally considered to be shafted before the final details of this came out, we've also given Carlton 63 and 68 and downgraded to 73 as though we weren't giving up enough already. So you can only just laugh, because what else are you going to do? I've never seen this much rage and outrage from West Coast fans and non-West Coast fans alike on social media before. I'm trying to compare it to the Sydney loss in 2023 where we lost by 30 goals. I don't think I went on Twitter that much. Maybe I did, but I just don't. I'd be interested to know the amount of vitriol that has come toward West Coast as a result of this trade. I think it might exceed certainly anything I've seen before. I wasn't on Twitter when the Tim Kelly deal went through, but I suppose you can, even with the Tim Kelly deal, even though things didn't work out, and while I was still probably critical that we bent over a little bit in that deal, we could have held a little bit of a firmer stance, absolutely. At least, I'd imagine there was still there was a portion of West Coast fans that thought, okay, well, at least we're getting Tim Kelly, right? So you can understand the logic. Whereas this is just so much harder to understand the logic of it. For where we're meant to be as a footy club, again, I'm repeating myself. I think we all know that, but it's insane. And I was kind of looking forward to seeing the Eagles put out social media once the deal was confirmed. Welcome to the West, Matt Owies and Liam Baker, because I was just I can't wait to see that comment section. And I kind of wanted West Coast social media to realize how much everyone hated this, within reason, abuse, and I think a few people crossed the line a little bit here and there, but it was still kind of entertaining. I wanted to get the popcorn out at 1:45 a.m. to see everyone just absolutely serve the Eagles for this. People were talking about going down to Mineral Resources Park with a protest, go for it. It just makes me laugh, to be honest. Which should not hide the fact that I am still disgusted with this trade. But it was just almost nice to see every West Coast fan just about united on one issue. I just wish, it had been something better. So having slept on it, do I feel any better about the trade? Not really. I think all that will happen over time is you sort of, any issue or problem in your life, you just kind of mentally adjust over time and stop feeling so angry, because that's how we, evolved as humans. You just can't feel awful about an issue all the time. You eventually adjust to your new reality, and that will happen over time here, but it doesn't change the fact that this strategy that we're employing is so weird. I'll go back to Don Pike, like a few weeks ago, and I think he was interviewed on SEN or something, or 6PR, not that long ago. And he maintained two things. He said, we want to build our list through this draft. We realize that's the way to, I'm paraphrasing, but we realize that's the way to go forward. And he did say this draft. And he used the phrase, we're not going to sell the farm. How embarrassing for Don Pike in this situation. And I actually have to wonder, how much say did he have in this? Was he involved in this? Did he know the diabolical shitstorm that the West Coast was going to inflict upon us? In this trade period? Like, was he on board with this? I don't know. There's no reason to suggest he would be involved in the negotiations. And as CEO, he has to then put up a front and defend it. So he has come out again on SEN now. And he says, if you look at the deal in isolation, the slide from 3 to 12 and using 14 to get Liam Baker looks a bit odd. Oh, yes. Odd is exactly the word I was looking for, Donny. That's right, you get Donny now. As the airways were lighting up in Perth with talk-back calls from aggrieved Eagles fans. I have to say that Kane Corns' monologue about David Attenborough and how West Coast with his wildebeest that everyone was feasting on, I thought that was funny as hell. Kane Corns is bang on about this issue. And I will challenge Kane when he, says stupid things about the Eagles. But he says, like when he roasts us for shit stuff, I will get on board with it. Honestly, the last thing I really want to see when I am this against West Coast's moves and, when West Coast are diabolical on the field, like I don't actually want to see the media going light on us, but I will pick him up for certain things like roasting Jake Waterman or whatever. Anyway, getting back to Don Pike's comments. But for us, it was part of a bigger play we had around Liam and the commitment we made to him to bring him to the club. So we were fulfilling and honouring that commitment as well as sliding back in a draft we believe has got some depth. So what does this mean? Is this a bigger play? It's kind of implying that there's more to come, which makes me really nervous. But at the same time, that kind of just reads as though we committed to Liam and we did everything we could to get him to the football club. I like that West Coast cares about players and will form relationships, but at the same time, you've got to still uphold the needs of the football club. And I feel like most other competent football clubs would not bend over backwards and shoot themselves in the foot all in one fell swoop to make this happen. I guess it's not going to be popular with everyone, says Don Pike, but we're going to get a good player, we believe, at 12, not as good as we would get at 3. We recognise that. Yeah, great. When it boils down to it, the thing that I am upset about is the disregard for this year's draft. So we had pick 3, and I won't rewrite history. I was open to a pick swap, a downgrade of 3 to ideally 6 to 8. Like if we'd stayed in the top 8, I would have been okay with that. Moving all the way down to 12 is significant, and further to that, we've got nothing else. We hold 12 and 26 and 73 in this year's draft. A draft in which most clubs have a pretty much agreed, through quotes, we can verify that, and also their actions of trying to get into this year's draft. West Coast, aside from Gold Coast, doing their own academy thing because they don't play by the same rules, aside from that, West Coast is on its absolute lonesome, doing the exact opposite thing to everyone else in the competition. To be at this point of our rebuild, and look, the 2024 was a shit season. It was. We played 5 good games, maybe 1 or 2 extra losses you tack on to the end of that, and even one of our wins, we probably didn't play that well. To then go into the draft with a draft hand that is the 6th worst on points of any team in the competition. These are the only 5 teams that have a worse draft hand than us on points, which isn't a perfect thing, but in this case, it does reflect reality. Hawthorn, Collingwood, the Dogs, the Cats, and the Swans. 5 teams that either played finals or probably should have, Collingwood being the one that should have. And one of those teams was a grand finalist, the other one made a prelim. My God. So yeah, I think the Eagles have shat the bed with this deal. So I'm trying to get into the head of West Coast here. Good luck. I must say, as an aside, there is something that's worse about this because it's a new list management team and we have brought in new staff, a new CEO, new list manager, and changed so much about the way we do things. I think it makes it feel worse because we don't have a back history with this particular group of managers and people making these decisions of us getting things right. This is a brand new team we've brought in to rectify everything that's gone wrong at this club and try and build back to being contenders again. So the fact that they have so badly cooked this immediately compounds the disappointment, I think, and it makes me concerned But yes, getting back to why I think not why this deal happened, but my suspicion is West Coast, prior to dealing with Carlton here, were probably aware of the fact that Hawthorn, who were obviously still dealing with for Tom Barrass, Hawthorn would have known that West Coast, if they didn't do a side deal with someone else, not necessarily Carlton, would have relied on getting a deal done for Tom Barrass fairly imminently so that they can move on to get their target, because West Coast had committed to Liam Baker. So in this scenario, West Coast do a side deal that did not involve a deal for Tom Barrass. The onus is no longer on us to get a deal done with Hawthorn. We actually relieve ourselves of the incentive to deal with Hawthorn, which should in theory put pressure back on Hawthorn, because now we can wait it out to the deadline, and Hawthorn, if they want their player, do have to satisfy us, whereas previously we probably had some degree of urgency getting a deal done for Barrass because it would have made it easier for Liam Baker. Now, it's a low percentage play, but I think that is what's happened here. It's the only logical explanation for trying to do this deal on the side. Now, does it fix that? Can it save? Will Tom Barrass getting 2 first rounders in an ideal scenario, and I don't even really expect that to happen, but if we got 2 first round picks for Tom Barrass, would it even save the terrible trade we did with Carlton? No, because they're future first round picks, and this is the strong draft, and we hold 2 picks in the top 70. So whatever way you slice it, I don't think we've done well here, and that's even if we get 2 first rounders for Barrass, which for the record, I would have preferred picks this year, naturally. Now, I know Hawthorn don't have that to offer, and they took that off the table, obviously, with trading that to Carlton, although that 14 would have never ended up at us anyway. But, you know, for all this talk of like banking first rounders next year for Chad Warner, in an ideal world, we would have had a chance to hit this draft hard so that the next year we were in a position to trade draft picks, because we would have had 4 years in a row of hitting the draft hard, and then you can justify going for a player like Chad Warner. But instead, we're not entirely traded out of a draft, but for a draft that's talented and deep, we have one of the worst draft hands that is reflective of a team that finished 8th, not 16th. So we've dropped the ball there, and having those extra first rounders for Chad Warner, that doesn't alleviate it too much for me, to be honest. It's a weaker draft, and we probably could have still got that done anyway. I saw the Eagles are still interested in Dev Robertson, which is baffling to me. So that to me, having gotten Owies with limited list spots, if we're still going for Dev Robertson, that means to me West Coast have accepted they're just not going to be able to rectify this draft hand. It means we're going to probably take 2 selections, maybe a third, and have Owies and Robertson in their ideal world. And, you know, if I'm Brisbane, I'm absolutely asking for pick 12 for Dev Robertson, because with West Coast, that could possibly be accepted. I saw West Coast sign a new development manager today, and I was half expecting pick 12 to have gone to the Bulldogs for that. I'm being a little bit silly, but why go for Dev Robertson now? Having said all this, it is not up to me to tell anyone how to be an Eagles fan, but I would urge people to be able to take a beat and try not to blame Liam Baker and Matt Owies for this. It is not their fault that the club has just completely shat the bed. Liam Baker's worst crime here is that he wanted to come play for us, and he is probably going to be a good player for us. Now, obviously, I don't support the trade at all, but he wants to come play for us. So, I mean, I've seen on Twitter people saying, let's boo him. Like, I realize that it's probably just a vocal minority, but broadly speaking, I don't think it's in anyone's best interest for us to rag on Liam Baker and Matt Owies. I think it's poor form if we continue to do that, and it may not manifest in booing, but it might be one of those things where as soon as he has a bad game, the narrative gets toxic, and who knows what social media would be like. I think we just need to separate that. We need to accept that these boys are Eagles. Same thing with Matt Owies. Like, this is not his fault. This is not his fault. This is Matthew Clark's fault. And, he's a decent player, I think. Not worth being steak knives in this deal, but I said all along, like, he should never have been a delisted free agent, and he can absolutely offer something to any AFL team. But he was blindsided by his club and didn't have somewhere to go, and West Coast offered him a place. So he wants to come play for us, and I think we just need to back him in within reason. So support him, and ultimately just not turn on him disproportionately hard because he was involved in this trade. I don't think that's fair. I haven't even been able to bring myself to watch the highlights of Liam Baker and Matt Owies yet. I will in time, make more content around this and analyse what they can bring to us, but we can separate that from this trade being a big fart. It'd be interesting to see what we do from here. When I say interesting, I mean terrifying. What do we do with pick 12? Do you guys think that we should move this pick to try and get more picks in the top 30? Because sure, 3 and 12, there's a big gap between that. When we accept there's a group of elite midfielders that we really needed, I don't even want to think about it anymore. But there is a huge gap between that. However, is there a big gap between 12 and later? I suppose none of us are truly qualified, but we can have some degree of opinion. Now, I'm not suggesting we do these trades, but these are some ideas that we could split pick 12 when you've accepted, we've already missed out on the top talent in this year's draft and the next batch is fairly even. Could we somehow save this situation by getting 2 picks? We know that Sydney offered 9 and 22 for Gold Coast pick 13, so presumably they might come to us with 12. Would we want 19, 22, and also our 26? That's 3 picks in the top 26. Would that be better than just 12 and 26? I could be persuaded for that one, to be honest, even though, it's not particularly sexy. And look, sure, there's Beau Allen. I know he's got his favourites, and look, I'm sure he's a good prospect. But if that was our play, to have a pick for Beau Allen, we enter the draft later than Fremantle now, which is just great. Could we use a future first to trade back in? Like if we get ideally 2 from Hawthorn, obviously that's ideal. Would a team trade a teens pick this year? You'd have to think, given what everyone else is doing, except us, that they wouldn't have the motivation to do that. But obviously I would consider it. I would not be surprised if Geelong come for us for pick 12 in order to try and get Bailey Smith done. They have 17 and 38. That for me is a bit gross, but if we really don't think there's a difference between 12 and 17, which again I think is more justifiable than saying there's no gap between 3 and 12. But 17 and 38, would that be better? It's a bit gross for me. I wouldn't necessarily. I'd rather probably have 19 and 22 than 17 and 38, to be honest. But I do expect Geelong could come at us for that. And then finally, GWS have 16 and 21. Again, that's the best offer of anything I've suggested so far, but would they do that to move up from 16 to 12? Probably not, but I guess broadly speaking, would you flip 12, bit of a downgrade, but get an extra pick that probably is required at the moment because of the situation we've put ourselves in of only having 2 meaningful picks? Anyway, that's where it sits at the moment, guys. I suppose the next video I'll do for you is after the trade deadline day where we discuss what happened with Tom Barras, and then, I'll probably the day after that do a trade period review for every club on True Footy and do one for West Coast as well. I'm also going to be live streaming on True Footy. I don't know how many of you only know me through True Eagle, but I do have a footy channel called True Footy that I've been doing for 7 years. And I think, around Perth time, maybe 3 p.m. tomorrow, we're going to be live to discuss everything as it happens. So let me know in the comments what you think, Eagles fans. And for now, I nearly set up the Eagles, but I might retire that one for at least one more video. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.